Right, hello everyone, and a big welcome to all those that have joined from across the world. I'm sure there's many of you joined in for this very special TBA seminar. Big thanks to the TBA joining up in conjunction with the Bred podcast, as today we have something exceptionally unique for you, as we're not far away now from those glorious 5 days at Royal Ascot. And for that matter, we wanted to bring you more insight into the meeting. And by doing so, we're going to give you some insight into the most prestigious breeding operations in the world. You can see that Barry Mahon has joined me from what I feel must be a very nice looking site in the Juddmonte offices. And Barry, thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been an absolute flying start to 2025 for Juddmonte. Top level wins, new talent emerging. Of course, your Stallions continue to shape the future as well. So with all that in mind, it's going to be very exciting to discuss all of that with the prism of Royal Ascot coming up. You've also announced that Irish champion jockey Colin Keane is now your retained rider. So I say there's a real buzz around the Juddmonte operation at present, coming into such an important few days next week.
Thanks, Jess. And it's a pleasure to join you this evening. Definitely, look, it's the week before one of the biggest weeks racing of the year. And, you know, all these big organizations, the big owner breeders, they put so much time and effort from the time the mating is first conceived to the time the foal is born. And they all do it with one dream of, you know, winning a classic or turning up next week in Royal Ascot and competing in any of the races, not only the Group 1s, even the handicaps. They're phenomenally hard to win. It's high class racing, and the atmosphere and the ambience and the royal family all in situ. It makes it a special week.
Yeah, so what we'll do, we'll go through the key Juddmonte runners that you're looking forward to running, and we'll also spotlight the Stallions behind them, and then also the horses that might not be representing Juddmonte, but your Stallions are represented via them. The likes of Frankel and Kingman are punching left, right, and centre, and it must be a proud week as well, not just for the horses that you've bred, but the horses that you can see carrying their names on the race card. We know that His Highness Prince Khalid Abdullah loved Royal Ascot, and looking back, goes back to sort of 1979. I think it was the first winner that the Juddmonte team had there. So is it every year, is it important to field a good selection of horses? Do you go and ask your trainers, what can we run at Royal Ascot, or does it happen quite naturally? Do you pride on the fact that these horses have to sort of come into their own at this time of the season?
A little bit of both, I think, Jess. You know, I think the Group 1 horses, they tend to naturally get there. It's the natural progression, whether they start off in a Guineas trial or a Guineas, or, you know, some of the other older horse Group 1s. It's a natural progression for the Group 1 horses. And, you know, a lot of the Group 1 races over any distance are staggered during the year, that you can bounce from one into the other. So I think the better horses definitely just end up following a natural progression. The handicappers, you know, there's obviously a little bit more plotting and planning with them. We've a few nice horses to run this week that, you know, they've had their runs this year, and we've probably had to put them away to protect the mark they were on, rather than running again and you know, blowing what could be a nice winning chance in Ascot. So you do have to manage them a little bit closer. And then obviously the 2-year-olds, look, we're not lucky enough to have a 2-year-old this year. We've had some lovely 2-year-old winners there in the past, and the last one being Calix. But this year, unfortunately, we have a nice bunch, but they just weren't the most precocious. So we'll have to wait a little bit longer for them. But again, they naturally, if they pop up and win their maiden in impressive fashion, your first thought is Ascot straight after it. But you know, Ascot for a 2-year-old is tough. It's a very, very tough task, mentally and physically. And you need a very, very high class 2-year-old, a very sound 2-year-old, and mentally a very stable 2-year-old to be able to go there, or you end up, you know, probably doing harm for the rest of the season.
Yeah, it's very important, and dividing them up from the Group 1 horses, the 2-year-olds and those handicappers. And I sense there's a few plot jobs. There could be some handicappers that we can follow. We might be able to try and grab a price before they've gone, as we're still a few more days away. But let's start with those top tier horses, the Group 1 horses. And on the opening day, the Queen Anne Stakes, the Juddmonte Silks will be sported by Lead Artist, winner of the Lockinge. So now a Group 1 winner. And Barry, I suppose, looking at this horse, a son of Dubawi, plenty of expectations for him, I'd imagine, as a 4-year-old. Did you think landing a Group 1 so early was going to be something that he could achieve? Did you always believe yourself in the Gosdens that he would do that?
Yeah, we always had huge belief in this horse, Jess. Even last year, we felt he was a top class horse. He's the most magnificent specimen of a horse. He's beautifully bred. He's an amazing physique, and John and Hady always liked him. He had a little hold up at the end of his 2-year-old career, just before he was due to make his first start. And I think they wisely said, look, we'll wait till the spring of next year, which they've done. And, he obviously started in nice fashion in Newmarket and went on and won the next time. We always did hold him in very, very high regard. We were probably at the stage where we were just starting to question ourselves a little bit that, were we wrong? I think we ran him on soft ground at the July meeting last year and he didn't like it. And we made the probably bad mistake of running him in soft ground again in Sandown on his first start this year, where he disappointed us. But John and Hady both said after the race, forget about that run. That's not his run. We're sticking to plan A, which is the Lockinge. And that's what they've done. And he trained beautifully into it. And, what a renewal it was this year. I don't think we've seen a Lockinge like that for a number of years, with all the Guineas winners and Dancing Gemini, etc. And he done it in good fashion. He's a proper horse. It's a mile, fast ground, straight track. He's a proper colt, and one that we're very excited for next week.
He's doing the route as a 4-year-old that Frankel did, his dam sire, going from the Lockinge to the Queen Anne. But you touched on that dam side. He's out of Obligate and from the Hasili line. How important has it been for Juddmonte to see that family in particular produce another Group 1 colt?
Yeah, very much so, and even more so. Isn't it great to see Frankel coming through already as such a successful broodmare sire? Which is an important thing for us going forward, because obviously we have plenty of daughters of his, so that's exciting for us. But it's a great family, and as I say, it's a young family, young mare, and obviously by Dubawi, who's phenomenally proven. So it's an exciting cross. Obviously, Frankel works well on Dubawi, but I'm sure it works equally as well the opposite way. So he's very much exciting to look forward to.
Yeah, we've seen so time and time again that Dubawi Frankel cross. So I suppose potentially looking forward as a stallion prospect, he kind of he's sort of a bit set apart from the others as a stallion potentially at Banstead or somewhere else.
Yeah, hopefully. I think the owners, Prince Khalid's family, will decide that later in the season. But I think definitely myself and Simon and Douglas Erskine Crumb will be encouraging them strongly to retire him to Banstead at the end of the season, because as I touched on, he's such a phenomenal physical, and from that great Hasili family, I think he could be a very important stallion in the future.
Yeah, certainly. So let's see how the rest of his season pans out. But I suppose nearly in a way kind of got a job done, that Group 1 in the bag. But exceptional race to start off Royal Ascot, that Queen Anne. But you've got a cracking chance, Barry, to make it a very memorable day for Juddmonte. And I suppose the St James's Palace Stakes with Field of Gold is the race that we're all going to be eagerly anticipating. Currently in the lineup, you've got Field of Gold, Jonquil and Winlord, three very exciting 3-year-old colts. You sent 3 to the Irish 2000 Guineas. I suppose it's difficult to separate them when the races, especially their classics, on offer. Have you and will you go for all 3 come declaration stage?
I think at the minute, yes, we're hoping to go with Winlord and Field of Gold. I think that's plan A. Jonquil, again, he's obviously high class and he's just touched off in a French Guineas. But he's a lot of speed, that horse, and both Oisin and Andrew feel like a step back in trip would be no problem. So we're probably looking at the Commonwealth Cup with him as plan A.
And as you say, with him, trying to get him to have another opportunity at a Group 1, is that sort of primarily the objective for him on what is already a pretty good CV, but also coming up against a Field of Gold with the price he is, makes life hard for him and probably hard for the team to have to pitch them up against each other.
Yeah, it's very hard. And look, we want to try and give all the horses their chance. We want to try and give all the trainers and the staff that look after them a chance at, on a big week, at a big race. And as I say, we all felt when we sat down and discussed it with the owners that the Commonwealth was a good fit. It's a stiff six. His mother was a 6 furlong mare herself. She was high class for Michael Stout, or she won't say high class, but she was very good for Michael Stout, and had a lot of pace. And obviously then it comes from, Frankel's family, but it comes from that fast arm. Joyeuse was, again, very fast, and she's bred Array, who was, Group 2 winning 2-year-old. So there's a lot of speed from that leg of the family. So we just feel that a stiff six and Ascot could be right up the street.
Yeah, look, De Vega, obviously classy animal, but I've always felt that he's done well. He adds that little bit of sprinting element in it too. So with these high class types, whatever that sort of line of the family seems to offer, it seems to produce time and time again.
Yeah, exactly. Look, he's out of a Dubawi mare who's out of an Oasis Dream mare. And look, as we discussed earlier, Dubawi mares, they're very good broodmare sires. And Lope de Vega is a phenomenally talented stallion from 6 furlongs to, a mile and a half, really. He can get anything. And, he's had some very good fast horses like Lope Fernandez, and he's had some horses that stayed very well. So he's very versatile. And so just this particular leg of that great family is probably following in the Kind's footsteps. They're quite fast and speedy. And as I say, we just feel like this guy has that speed to be able to perform over 6.
Okay, so exciting to see him in the Commonwealth, what he can do over that. Just touching on Luke de Vega's obviously got that Shamadal influence, which does come through with Field of Gold as well. A maternal line that's new to Juddmonte, and you were very heavily involved with the purchasing of Field of Gold. The family, we've been able to discuss and really dissect it even more since the Irish 2000 Guineas win. I know Bobby and Nora Donworth ever so proud of this horse, but from that mighty Serena sister family, was that something that drew you in? And if you were going to go out and outsource a new maternal line, is this everything you want and more at Juddmonte?
Exactly. I think it's, as you said, it's a great family. I know Simon Mockridge has been a huge fan of this family for many years. I think we've maybe made a few attempts to buy into it. And I think in particular there was an Oasis Dream filly that was quite smart, that he wanted to buy a number of years ago, and unfortunately she made maybe double what we were thinking she'd make. But it's a great family, as you said. Bobby and Honora have really, I think their interview in the days after the Irish Guineas showed that how well they've managed their leg of the family, and they have mated them to top stallions, and they've got them in good homes with good trainers, and it's a very successful family. It's sound, they're genuine, they're tough, they have speed, and I think mixed with Kingman and Shammerdal, it's obviously Field of Gold has that speed, but he has that toughness and soundness as well, so it's very exciting.
And I did read an article as well from you. I think it was James Thomas in the Racing Post, how you said how important it is to go and back these operations that do go and send horses to the sales. And you've got a wonderful breeding operation yourself. You probably don't necessarily need to go outsourcing and purchasing, but for the strength of the industry as a whole, it's been great to see, not just with him but also with Chaldine, what can be done and what can be bought, and how much you are a supporter of that system.
Yeah, and look, that's all down to His Highness Prince Khaled and his family. They felt that it was important to invest. Prince Khaled loved his homebreds. He was fanatical about his breeding and his homebreds. And I think when his family became more involved after his passing, they naturally felt that it's important to keep everything fresh and keep some new blood and some new bloodlines in there, whether it's colts or fillies. and they've been very proactive at the sales, and they've bought some lovely horses, like the Tane and Chaldine and Field of Gold, with another lovely filly won today called Blue Bolt in Newbury. And they're very important, whether they're colts or fillies, they're very important for Juddmonte going forward, and it's just hopefully strengthening Juddmonte's breeding and pedigree lines going forward, which is important.
Yeah, you went to the sales, you bought Chaldine, a Guineas winner, who's now standing at stud with you, and Field of Gold, ultimately another horse purchase and become the son of a important stallion for you to, I'd imagine, stand at stud with you. So how much do you think Kingman and the potential Field of Gold stallion stands up? Do you think it's important that they're there as very different from a dam's perspective, and that they will ultimately complement each other at stud?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think Kingman is relatively young when it comes to talking about sires of sires. Palace Pier and Calix were his first two sons, and Calix has obviously done very well. Palace Pier is just starting with his 2-year-olds. I noticed he had a very impressive 2-year-old winner today in Newbury, from very few runners. So I know the trainers like them. So I think as a sire of sires, I think Kingman is going to be very exciting. They have that brilliance, that Invincible Spirit Green Desert line. They have untold brilliance, and sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to channel them in the right direction. But I think when you do, they're unbelievably talented, and their natural raw ability is just second to none. So I think for us as a farm going forward, to have a son of Kingman out of a Shamrock mare is huge, and especially with all the Sadler's Wells Galileo line mares that are around, I think to be able to offer that to breeders is going to be a great addition to Juddmonte.
Yeah, certainly. As we've said, he's an Irish 2000 Guineas winner. St James's Palace is a short price for this. The one horse that's not in this race but was against him last time was Cosmic Year, who was a runner-up in the Irish 2000 Guineas. And I suppose, would it be fair to say it would be key to try and keep him away from Field of Gold so he can get his deserved Group 1, and how key is that for a horse that is slightly different? He took longer to get to the track, didn't have that 2-year-old career, but ultimately has the same sire, so possibly could offer something quite similar when it comes to stallion time.
Yeah, again, look, I think the owners are very keen to let them take their chances when it suits, and that's why we done what we done in the Curragh. Cosmic Year had we didn't bypass anything, but we had sort of made the plan after the trials that he was the one that was going to go to Ireland, and Field of Gold was going to go to Newmarket, and Jonquil would go to France. So I said that was the plan, and it wasn't a case of keeping Cosmic Year away from the others. I think Harry very much wanted to go to Ireland. He felt the Curragh would suit him, which it did, and I think he's run a big race there. So to give him his chance to win a Group 1, we thought the Prix Jean Prat probably be a good option for him. The track is, it's a brilliant track in Deauville, and it'll just give him a little bit of a chance too. He's had a couple of races there quick together. He obviously won a novice at the start of the season, and then he backed up into Newmarket for the listed race before going over to the Curragh. So he's had 3 runs. So he's had a little break. Harry has freshened him up, and he'll train him now for the Prix Jean Prat. And hopefully the little break will have brought out a little bit more improvement. I thought he ran a huge race in Ireland, by the way. I think it just didn't maybe fall his way. He was on the wrong side, and Oisin felt that he got a little bit further back, and he had to switch out and wait for a run. And I think when he done all that, he was running on well at the end. So I think he is an exciting horse. There is no doubt. As I say, to give him his opportunity, and Harry and the lads that look after him to win a Group 1 in France, I think is a very good idea.
Yeah, to relative inexperience to finish second in a classic is majorly important. Final question then, and we could probably speak about them all night, but could Cosmic Year potentially stay in training as a 4-year-old if we see Field of Gold retired at the end of this year?
I think it's a bit premature now to think of any of that. It'll all be discussed by the owners at the end of the season. Obviously, we have lead artists, as you say, and Field of Gold, Cosmic Year, and Jonquil. So look, hopefully hopefully they won't whip them all off the stud, or we might be going to Royal Ascot for only a few handicaps next year. So I think all that'll be decided later on in the year. But you'd imagine logically they'd like to keep some of them in training. At the end of the day, we're in it to race, we're in it to turn up in the big days. So if we can work it that some of them stay in training, that'd be huge for everyone.
Yeah, not a bad position to be in. Quite nice to have so many high-class colts under your care. So that is St James's Palace Stakes, as I said, mouth-watering race. The Derby's loss is this game, this race's game with Ruling Court in it as well, and Henri Matisse, Irish, French, and English 2,000 guineas winner in this race. But Jonquil goes to the Commonwealth Cup, so that's big news here. We'd love to get any questions. So if any attendees have anything for Barry, we will be monitoring them, but we will also be answering them at the same time. So please do feel free to ask any questions. We will move on. We've seen that there have been confirmations coming for the Queen's Vase, Barry. Nightwalker is in here at the moment. He never featured in the Derby, and it'd be great to get your perspective on sort of what happened there. I saw a couple of quotes from Tom Marquand saying that it never really happened for him. But he again represents an extraordinarily important family, the Grand Dam Scuffle, the family that is closely related to the Logician. So it cast me quite of interest and intrigue to see him in a race like this, potentially over this trip as well. So where are we with Nightwalker?
Yeah, look, he's come out of the Derby well, and I think that we sort of discussed after the race that it didn't really happen for him in Epsom. The ground was probably a little on the soft side, and I think Tom just felt that he never really travelled on it, and he was always behind, so he naturally looked after him, and he didn't have a hard race. Look, it's a quick turnaround, so John and Thady they'll have to assess him and make sure they're happy with him next week before confirming. But look, he's a colt we like. We thought he ran a nice race in the Dante. He can hit a little bit of a flat spot in his races, and we just feel that he'll stay well the further he goes up in trip. Obviously, he comes from the same family as Logician as well, who stayed well. So again, nice horse. Didn't happen in Epsom, but very much possible for the Vase if John and Thady feel like he's in top form.
Yeah, a son of Frankel, as you say, got that Logician influence. Who was by Frankel, who seemed to just thrive going as he stepped up in trip and really punched that, or emphasise what Frankel can do with horses and be ultimately stayers. But the dam side has been so well maintained and nurtured from the Juddmonte operation going back to Monroe, one of the earliest purchases. That line has just been so well maintained. You obviously prune them, you go through the stallions that work with them, but that must be one of the families that the operation is most proud of.
Very much so. And look, I think we seen it again last week with David O'Mara's filly winning for Cheveley Park from the same line. So it's a great family. There's huge speed in it with Bated Breath and Cityscape. And then obviously they stay well as well. So Logician obviously was a good stayer, and Collide, Okeechobee is a 10 furlong horse, so they stay. There's again a little bit like the Frankel family, there's an arm of it that stay well, and there's another arm that have a lot of speed. But it's a huge family. It's just kept improving year on year. They're tough, hardy, genuine horses. They try very hard. So when you get a good one from that family, it's very exciting.
You're just looking at Scuffle, she seems to have gone to multiple different stallions and always seem to have been able to produce something. Do you find that there are some mares that sort of just seem to click, regardless of necessarily, what it might be? It's just that they are the ones that just click with whatever stallion, over whatever distances, whatever models they are.
Yeah, and definitely, them blue hen mares, they can do it with everything. As you say, she's produced stakes horses by Champs-Élysées, Dancilli, Frankel, Time Test. She is a very nice 3-year-old by Kingman called Skimmer that won first time out, and could be a very important horse in the second half of the season. And even her daughters, by Oasis Dream, obviously Estrange is a very good filly that we've seen winning last week for Cheveley Park. and our own filly Sunley, in Francis Graffards was very impressive 2 weeks ago in France, winning the Group 3. So it's, the daughters are great brood mares, and the colts are tough, consistent, sound, genuine performers. So it's a great family.
You mentioned Skimmer. He was a horse that a few have been asking about. The second half of the season, has that been done for a reason? Is he had a bit of time, or do you want to sort of target him at
No,
he
had a tiny little setback. Nothing of any significance. He actually scoped dirty, so Harry has given him some time. We were sort of hopeful of getting him to the Hampton Court, was our plan A, but unfortunately he just needed a bit more time, and when he wasn't going to get there, we sort of felt like we'd give him a good break and aim him for the second half of the season. But he's a very talented colt, obviously by Kingman. I know Harry holds him in high regard, and Oisin was very impressed with him the day he won. So I think he could make up into an exciting horse later this year.
Yeah, when a horse wins first time at Leicester, I know it's a track that Sir Michael Stout liked to send newcomers, didn't he? And when they win in your colours there, you always got to keep an eye on them, and from such a distinguished family. We'll move on to the Commonwealth Cup. We've got Babouche, who you touched upon, and obviously Jonquil now, and Babouche, who is all about the speed. And that's what's so wonderful about the Juddmonte families that you produce. There's a little bit of there's a balance, and it keeps you interested wherever you want to look. You supported Kodiak a lot with the mare. We know the full sister Zarinsk, the real sharpness that she showed at 2, and Babouche has done that as well. But development wise, has she physically and mentally sort of come into her own? Because Jo's been very vocal about how easy she has been to train this season.
Yeah, I think she's wintered well, and I think she got a lot more laid back and relaxed, and even dare say lazy over the winter. So she was going through the motions at home, as Ger said, and she was taking a while to get fit. And obviously we went down to Cork over an inadequate trip, thinking we'd probably still win, given her quality, but knowing that she needed to run. So we came away from Cork a little disappointed, but Ger, in fairness, said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "I've plenty left to work on," and today was just about getting her out. And then she turned up in Naas in the Lacken, which was always the plan, and I thought she was very impressive. I thought she had the race put to bed at the furlong pole, and she looked right back to her best. As you say, Zarinsk, her full sister, trained on well at 2. And I think this filly has the size and scope, to be equally as effective as a 3-year-old. So she's very exciting.
She's, as we mentioned, and sometimes I see that families are sort of offered back to the trainers that have done very well with sort of sisters or brothers. Is that always been a sort of a policy for the Juddmonte team to, if it's worked out well and we've got something of a similar ilk, you've trained them to a stage, you sort of know their minds, do you quite like keeping them supported, like the Harry Charlton family and the time test leg? They seem to do so well with them. Has that always been a policy?
Yeah, I think the owners, Prince Khaled, and now his family, I suppose if you do well with a certain arm of it, you deserve the reward of receiving the next one along. So yeah, more often than not, that has been the case. But often then you have to remember they're all individuals, and sometimes a certain individual just might not suit, maybe not a trainer, but maybe some horses mightn't suit Newmarket. Some horses might be better suited to, the Downs of Kingsclear, where it's maybe a bit quieter, or France, again, different style of racing, and depending on different idiosyncrasies. I think we've always tried to place them where we've placed the horses where we feel like they can excel. And naturally, look, if there is a certain horse that a trainer has done well with, you try your best, and the owners would be always very keen to reward them with the sibling.
And that sort of leads me quite nicely on to the family of Kalpana. I asked you before we came on the call, and I do know this, but you can tell everyone. But Prince of Wales Stakes, we thought she was going to be in that, but we see it's a real much a rematch of the Tassels Gold Cup, where I thought she ran an absolutely brilliant race, but ultimately she is a horse that wants 12 furlongs. So you can let us know what your plans are with her for next week.
Yeah, I think Andrew's been keen to go to the Hardwick with her on Saturday. I think back over 12 furlongs, it is our optimum. We sort of tied with the Prince of Wales, and we would have loved a rematch with the front two in the Tats Gold Cup. But if the ground was on the softer side, we'd have went that way. But the fact that the ground is at the minute looking like it's going to be good or better, we felt that for the filly and for the remainder of the season, it was probably more optimal to go back to 12 furlongs. And she was obviously very good last October in Ascot over that distance. And I think given her comeback run, it's fair to say we feel like she's retained all her enthusiasm. So we're very excited to see her and see her back over the 12 furlongs. And as I say, it'll tee her up nicely for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, and talking about trainers that really nurture a family, it was Pascal Barry that really shaped Kalpana's family. He trained her down zero gravity, sort of later maturing types, and real improvements in that family, I suppose, might be a family trait, improving with age. But it wasn't completely instant, was it, for the dam? And it's really study of man that's matched to her very well. Can you just remind us about that process and why study of man, why you thought that was a good option?
Yeah, as you say, you're very right in saying that, Jess. It took us a while with the mare. We actually sold the mare before Kalpana ran. We'd probably had a number of foals, and she'd thrown some very nice foals, one of which unfortunately died. It was a Camelot. It was a beautiful Camelot. And then a few of the other members of the family had disappointed us. And Kalpana came along, and she was a lovely, big, quality, genuine looking filly on the weak side. Looked like she was going to take some time. And as a 2-year-old, I mentioned her a few times to Andrew, and he was sort of, it's not happening, it's not happening. And it did take her, until I know she won first time out early as a 3-year-old, but even that day she won, and we didn't get it, we weren't getting excited. But I think it was sort of from the spring of the year, I think when she won that handicap in Ascot, I think we felt like we had a very nice filly that day. And then she came good towards the end of the year. So as you say, it's a family that it takes time. It takes time to mature, and luckily that the owners are always being patient. Prince Khaled, that's one thing, he had phenomenal patience, and his ethos was, if a horse needs time, give him time. And the family have followed the same suit. And Study a Man, look, he was a wonderful racehorse. He's a beautifully bred horse, very good looking, and Kirsten Rosen she's been a great stallion master over the years with some very, very good stallions. So we're always keen to support her. And we actually bought a share in them when he retired to stud, and we were keen to send him a nice mare and hope for the best. And we've been rewarded with Kalpana, so it's very exciting.
That probably answers my next question quite easily, and that you probably sent a good few mares to him this year.
Yeah, definitely we have some lovely foals by him, and some yearlings by him. So I think he is a very good stallion. I think we've seen that they need a little bit of time, but there's no harm in that. And as I say, they've shown that they have high class ability, and when a stallion does that, everyone is willing to give them the time and have some patience. But he's an exciting young horse, to be fair, for Landweights.
And the long-term project of winning back-to-back Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe still firmly on the agenda?
Yeah, look, of course it is, but we all know how hard that is, and we were lucky to be there last October with Blue Stocking. We'd been there the two previous years with Westover, and we walked away empty-handed. But Juddmonte's record in the race is phenomenal, and of course we'll be gunning for that first weekend in October. But we're under no illusions how difficult it is, and look, hopefully the filly can stay healthy and well, and we can enjoy her for the rest of the season and see where she takes us then.
Yeah, another step on her journey in the Hardwick Stakes, which is very exciting. Again, Barry, well, I should say to everyone watching and listening, if you've got any questions, please do answer. But Barry, you said at the beginning of when we started chatting that there's obviously the Group 1 horses and then there's the handicappers, and now we've got a fair few of them, but I think from a pedigree perspective, which most people are here to jump in and listen to, there are a few that sort of stand out that I was keen to hear about. But if there are any that anyone in particular wants to get a mention in, please do let me know. Please do let me know. But before we got on the call, you told me that Pinhole will be going to the King George V. He also does have an entry into the Queen's Vase. So he's obviously highly regarded. He's bifrancal out of a Mizzen Mass mare, which is interesting. And we see quite a lot. And I think this is why I wanted to pinhole him, pardon the pun, that we see a lot of the time that the Juddmonte team try to balance that sort of transatlantic crossover. So one that has worked, but I suppose one that is taken quite, there's a lot of thought, there's a lot of areas of discussion to try and make sure that you balance that transatlantic decision making. So is that something that is done regularly? Do you have to or you always focus on it? Or is there some that you just feel like might just work?
Yeah, I think it's probably Simon Mockridge is the breeding guru in our organization, so he's always better equipped to answer these questions. But I think it's something that was more prevalent 5 or 10 years ago. I think that Juddmonte and Hole in the USA have shifted their focus to more a dirt-based broodmare band under the guise of Garrett O'Rourke, and obviously they've Elite Power and Mandaloon, which have been phenomenal, and Idiomatic again. So I think that there's less crossover now between Europe and America within the Juddmonte organization, and the USA broodmare band are primarily dirt-based mares going to dirt-based stallions. But look, as you say, there's still some of these mares that came from a few years back when there was some more turf-based stallions in America. And Mizzen Mast always done well. He's been a good solid broodmare sire, and obviously, as the dam of Pinhole, she's bred quadrilateral already. That was an exciting 2-year-old and won at Group 1 level. So yeah, it's always a fine line to juggle the American dirt based and the turf. But I think as we've seen over the years, we listened to Simon Mockridge last night on Jamie Railton's podcast. It's worked both ways. Back in the 70s and 80s, the success in Europe from American-based stallions, and also earlier, this success in America from horses that raced in Europe. So I think that definitely there is an option there to crossbreed some of these American horses with European horses, and sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong.
Yeah, certainly. And this horse who has not done a huge amount of racing, but he's clearly one that is probably going to be suited to a bigger field handicap, which I suppose Rafe Beckett as a trainer has done very well in. I think if I'm corrected, if I'm wrong, won this King George V this time. So he's sort of knows what it is, bubbling point, and off a rating of 93. I suppose if you think he could be a Queen's Vase entrant, he might be.
He's very much still now, just in case we're leading anyone astray, he's still very much a 50-50. We haven't made up our mind which race. And actually, when he spoke to Rafe about it again this evening, and he still just wasn't fully sure. But look, I think he will stay well. He'll stay 1.5 miles well, and we think he'll stay a little bit further. Obviously, when you look at the Chester race and you see Lambourne won it, and the horse of Charlie Johnson's was second in the Epsom Derby. On his last start, it's very good form. So whilst we probably just didn't feel like Epsom was for us, we always felt that there'd be a nice day in him, whether it was a handicap in Ascot or maybe a group race later in the season. But as I say, look, he'll turn up in one of them. We're just not sure which one yet.
Okay, brilliant. Rafe is also the trainer of Qirat, a half brother to Blue Stocking, from that wonderful Emulous family. a Royal Ascot type you like to hope for the Royal Hunt Cup? He ran a brilliant race on his comeback run back in May.
Yeah, I think he went off. I think I'm right in saying he went off favourite for the Britannia last year, and it just didn't happen for him that day. And maybe he went through a race or two after where, as a 3-year-old, he was probably still growing and still developing, and maybe just got a little weak on us through the mid-season. I think he came back good at the back end of the year last year, and obviously his first run this year was an eye catcher. Very nice horse. He's a typical showcasing. He's big and strong and good looking, chestnut horse, and a mile is his trip. And I think that this race will set up nicely for him. This has sort of been the plan, for most of the winter. He's probably a few pounds higher than we'd like, but I think he'll acquit himself very well.
He's also had the good experience of being at Royal Ascot, ran in that Britannia race. I feel like you always have a horse to follow in a Britannia. Brave Mission. He's bred from Frankel in that Dancing Brave line. He's got a really deep Juddmonte blend, developing into the kind of obvious sort of Britannia horse.
Yeah, again, a beautiful colt. I think his comeback run was good. We were happy with that, and again, this has sort of been the plan with him since the start of the season. So one run and straight into the Britannia. Rafe is happy with him. He's training well. He's a very, very good looking colt, and we'd still like to hope and dream that as the season goes on, he'll be able to mix it up in stakes company. He's beautifully bred, and he's a beautiful physical. So look, I think we're excited to see him. He's probably one of the handicappers that I'd be most excited about seeing next week.
Okay, there we go. That might be the plot job. He won't admit it. There's going to be one in there.
That'll be the one that gets beat.
Array, another horse. His Damn Joys is that half sister to Frankel and Noble Mission. We talked about the Hasili, that sort of the kind bracket of elite Juddmonte mares that family she's becoming. Array, I had down as a Woking horse, but you tell me is a Buckingham Palace type.
Yeah, he'll go to the Buckingham Palace. Look, he hasn't really found his best stride yet this year. He obviously missed last year through injury. And, when any horse misses a full 12 months, it just takes a while to get him back. And I felt that his second run was a progression on his first run. Andrew says he's training nicely. He's back into handicap company. And we'd hope he'd be competitive. He's probably at the top end of the weights, but he's a beautiful colt, and he has the size and strength to carry the weight. So we'd be hopeful that he can get back to winning ways, whether it's next week or later in the season. We do feel like he will get there and will be competitive back in group company.
Okay, so that's Array, who's began life on a high trajectory. So we really hope that he can do after having a small issue. You mentioned to me also from the Chaldean family, Kasaya, maybe potentially going under the radar a little bit. Is that right? Would she one for the Palace of Holyrood House?
Yeah, she's in the mix for it. Look, obviously she went off favourite for the Queen Mary last year, and she got an injury in the race and didn't get back to the races, and she's had a bit of a stop-start spring, but Andrew's been happy with her the last couple of weeks, and the handicapper gave her a rating, which was a help. So she's just ready to run. Probably thrown her in a little bit at the deep end, but she's ready to go. Andrew's very happy with her work, and we just thought, Ascot is such a nice track, good ground, and it's not too demanding on horses that have had little setbacks. So it'd be a nice track to start her back on, and whether she's straight enough to win it, it's a big ask. But she's a filly that we obviously held in high regard, and I think to go off favourite for the Queen Mary last year sort of showed the sort of regard she was held in. So whether she'll quite get back there or not, we don't know, but it'd be nice to see her back on track.
Yeah, certainly it will be nice. Yeah, it's been a long time off, so to come back and have a Royal Ascot in her sights obviously shows the faith that Andrew has for her, and an extremely important family as well. There are a couple of others. Shader in the Duke of Edinburgh is another one that you mentioned to me, so another handicap type.
Yeah, again, he's a lovely colt. He's a very late maturing horse, and John and Thady had to be very patient with him. It took him Definitely the first half of his 3-year-old career to learn what the game was all about, and he done it well. He finished up the year in good style, winning a few starts and rated 99. He made his comeback last week, which was always the plan, just to have one run. And he was very rusty and green and a bit lazy, but he ran well. I was happy with how he finished out the race, and he should strip fitter for it. And I think again he's a horse that we can be looking forward to next week, and he should be able to give a good account of himself.
Okay, we've got a question in who's asking, what's your dark horse for the week? I suppose there's been a good few that we mentioned, but of all of those that might just be going, I mean, I suppose Kasaya, who's not been seen for nearly a year, will be
Yeah,
going slightly under the radar, won't she?
yeah, she probably will, in fairness to her, but it is a big ask, and I think, look, Shader or Brave Mission are probably the handicappers. They're probably the two that we're most excited about.
And we'll wrap up on the horses that you've got from a Juddmonte perspective, but from a whole overall breeding outlook, I suppose, like seeing your stallions represented at the biggest races, the likes of Candelaria, I suppose, in the Gold Cup for Frankel, does that also give the whole team a sense of pride to see the potential of having Frankel having another horse of that sort of stratosphere, and how much is that as important, if not as important as the homebreds and those that you'll be racing next week?
Oh, it's hugely important, Jess. I think we all got a kick out of Mini Hawk winning the Oaks last week, by Frankel and Lake Victoria and the Irish Guineas. And as you say, the no matter who owns it or breeds it, the fact that it's by one of a Juddmonte stallions, it definitely does give us a great satisfaction. And they're two phenomenal horses, and they stand at big stud fees, and you have to be winning them races when you stand at them stud fees. And in fairness to both horses, they're doing it year in, year out, and they're competing at the biggest, whether it's classics or Royal Ascot or Breeders' Cups in November. They're competing on all the big stages, and it is exciting to follow them. Of course, we have a bit more fondness for them when they're in the Juddmonte colours, but it still doesn't stop us giving them a cheer on, like last weekend in Epsom.
Yeah, and you touched on at the beginning that Juddmonte has had 2-year-old Royal Ascot success before with Calix and Three Valleys, and sometimes some are ready for Royal Ascot, some aren't quite there yet. We saw the likes of Field of Gold slightly, so I think it was middle part of the season. Do you think you just have now more than you did maybe 10 or so years ago, sort of more later developing types, and that might be in part because of the stallions that you have, or even the brood mares that were sort of later developing types?
Yeah, definitely. I think that obviously with Sadler's Wells line and Galileo line, etc., Frankel and Kingman, we have a lot more classically bred horses, so it's less likely that you're going to see them pre-Ascot. I think usually once we get into mid-July onwards, we start to see a handful of them. I sort of guessed by talking to one or two of the trainers that we have a few ready to go, but the fact that they probably weren't going to fit into Ascot, there was no point in rushing to the races, so they'll I'm sure no doubt appear in the next couple of weeks post Ascot. So that'll be exciting. That's the next generation, and we hope to find another Field of Gold or Lead Artist or Blue Stocking, which is the hard part, to try and do it all again.
Yeah, certainly. There is a Frankel colt who was hugely impressive on debut at Newmarket in Treenmore, who cost a pretty penny at the sales. I think he's set for the Chesham. So I think it's still important to see Frankel's progeny doing well early on. It still feels exceptionally early for 2-year-olds, in my opinion, but you see a lot of these Wootton Bassets doing very well. But Frankel, to have a 2-year-old that is as early as that, is that ultimately something that needs to still be as part of his sort of resume of achievements?
No, I think he can do it. Look, you remember Chaldean won a Dewhurst and a Champagne, and he won his last 3 or 4 starts at 2, including the Group 1. We had a very good filly, another very good filly that was, I'm struggling to think of her name now. But I think at the end of the day, Lake Victoria is another one. There you go. You know, he's very capable of siring exceptional 2-year-olds. They stay well at 3, there's no doubt. But I think if the dam side is right, there is no question that he can sire some very good 2-year-olds. And it's just probably in general, the Juddmonte dam lines wouldn't be bred to be precocious. So we never have a lot of Royal Ascot 2-year-old runners. But the only thing I can say is that probably we've had phenomenal success with the few we have ran over the years. As you said, you know, Three Valleys and Calix being 2 of them. So whilst we don't turn up too often for them races, when we do, they're ones to take note of.
Yeah, certainly. We've got a question in for you, Barry. And I'd like to know who's given it in, but it's anonymous at the moment. They say Barry is quite hands-on in the young development stage. At what point did he know, or does he know, that these good horses would be useful? And I suppose at what point did he know that these good horses would be useful? Maybe the likes of Field of Gold, who obviously you had came in foal and then sort of brought on from a yearling. So you've always sort of been around the ones that you bought from a very early point, but even the ones from when they fold. So was there any point in any of the ones that are really throwing their head above the parapet now that you thought this one's a little bit different?
I think, Jess, you always have a bunch every year that, you know, will have a high rating and that you like. And yeah, you know, you sort of pick them out as your favorites as such. Doesn't always work out, but I think when we get into January or February, their 2-year-old career, if they're moving well and they've good temperaments and they start to do well, they have a very strong chance of being a racehorse. Doesn't always work out like that, but you know, when they have temperament and they have action and they're sound and they have the strength and the physique to continue to put on weight whilst their exercise is increasing, you know, you sort of sit back and say, this could be good. Doesn't necessarily work out that it is, the same way that, you know, the trainers will ring and say such and such is working well. We think he's a good horse. And, you know, by the end of his 3-year-old career, he's never won a race in 10 starts. And, you know, ultimately you never find out till you get to the racetrack, and they have to do it there. That's the place. And all our trainers, I think, are very much, you know, they train for the racetrack. They don't train to find out much at home. So look, we sort of always find out together with everyone else. We know and we like them. Lead artists, you know, would have been top of the pile, and Field of Gold would have been top of the pile, as would, you know, Shader. Shader is a prime example. You know, he's a horse that we'd have rated very highly. Look, he's a good horse, but he's, you know, 4-year-old now, still in handicap company. Babouche is obviously a filly we always rated very high. And then you have surprises. And look, Kalpana was probably one of them. She was a little on the weak side, as I said. She was good looking, and she was a little weak, and the mare had been a little disappointed. And she probably surprised us. And she came from left field, no doubt. You know, there was no great expectation from us or from Andrew. And I think every time she went to the races, she just surprised us. So to answer your question, you never really know until they cross the line, but you know you have your favourites, and you'd be just hoping that, you know, sometimes the dreams do come true.
Yeah, certainly. Oh, well, Barry, look, thank you. It's a huge week ahead, with a chance to shape, I suppose, Juddmonte's next generations of stallions, and this is the right stage to do it. So we wish you and the whole team the very best of luck. Before I let you go, I want a nap for the week. What's Barry Martin's nap of the week? And I suppose what would give you the most personal satisfaction to win too?
Oh, I think there's only one nap for me, Jess. Field of Gold.
Yeah, and I can probably because you were part of the whole buying process and you've seen him being nurtured from a horse from a young age to what he's achieved. It's been a great journey to be a part of.
Yeah, look, he's just a class animal from start to finish. You know, from when he was in Goffs as a foal, he was a class foal, and all winter then as a weanling and a yearling here, he was just a uncomplicated, always there, never caused any trouble, came out, done his work. Everyone loved him, you know, from every guy that sat on him here to, you know, every guy in John and Thady Gosden's. And, you know, he was always just a cool horse. And, you know, we feel like that, you know, hopefully he still has more to give.
Yeah, well, look, he's become a real fan favorite as well. So the best of luck. I've noted down Brave Mission and put a couple of asterisks around and put plot. So that one as well. So we'll see. The best of luck, Barry. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone that has been listening, taking up nearly an hour of your very, very precious time. We hope that we'll see you on the winners' podium next week, plenty of times, and wishing you and the whole team the very best at Royal Ascot 2025. Thank you.